Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Lee Humphreys. I am a professor in the communication department, and I am the director of the Cornell Center for Social Sciences, QuIRI, a Qualitative and Interpretive Research Institute. I'm very pleased to have with us today working groups that have been supported by QuIRI share with us what they did and what they learned. Just as a reminder, working group proposals are typically due in the fall and usually in October, and we can fund up to $500 per person, which can either be pooled or given out individually to researchers. Each working group needs to have at least one faculty member on it, but can involve graduate students, postdocs, research associates, what have you. And the goal is to really help people to create communities, intellectual, methodological communities to discuss research and ideas together. So to kick us off today, we have Leila Wilmers from the Department of Sociology, who will be talking to us about her working group on nationalism. Leila.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, I'm going to share my screen so I can pull up some slides. Can everyone see that? Yeah, great. Okay. Thanks for the introduction, Lee. So I'm here to talk about the faculty working group that we started thanks to a QuIRI grant on the theme of nationalism and identity. This is a picture of the five of us, and unfortunately the others couldn't be here with me today, so I'm sharing on their behalf as well. You can see we're representing 4 different departments across humanities and social science, a range of disciplines: history, sociology, geography, anthropology, and the arts, and also a range of regions that we focus on in our work. So covering the Caribbean, China, Venezuela, and Russia. So a fantastic group, and also another element of diversity within the group that was interesting was that we're at different stages of our career. So I'm a postdoc, a couple of people are non-tenured faculty, and a couple are tenured faculty. So we also had that possibility to exchange across different stages of experience and career development of our careers. So I'm going to talk a little bit today, just briefly to introduce the purpose of the group, why we decided we wanted to have a working group, and I'm going to talk through what we did specifically and what the results of these activities were, and specifically manuscript exchange, which was one of the core activities that we did, joint readings, and some events that we organized. And then I'm going to move on over to talking a little bit about the theme of nationalism and identity, and the benefits of exchange specifically in the current moment in terms of qualitative research on this theme. And I'm going to wrap up by telling you about our next steps, what we've done beyond the grant, and invite you all to attend an event that we're holding in a couple of weeks. Without further ado, the purpose of our group was to develop a space for cross-disciplinary and cross-regional exchange and peer feedback among qualitative researchers who are concerned with themes of nationalism and identity. And this was an idea that kind of came from my search when I first started my postdoc at Cornell for other researchers who were looking at these themes in their work, because I wanted people to bounce ideas off and the opportunity to build a bit of a community around this theme. And as I talked to people, I found there were actually lots of people in different departments who were researching these themes, but there wasn't really a network or a hub that existed for them. So this is how the original idea came about. And yeah, so one of the core activities that the grant enabled was manuscript exchange. So from the beginning, a few of us came together and decided to form this group and apply for the grant. And we set up a series of monthly meetings. And for each meeting, we planned a particular piece of work that we were going to read. And generally, it was a draft publication that somebody in the group had written. So it was really an opportunity for each person to have others coming from different angles, read their work, and to have a really in-depth discussion about your work, which was just an incredible thing. And so these are some of the, I've just put up a slide with some of the quotes from the others since they're not here, about how they benefited from this process of manuscript exchange. And it really was a benefit, I think, to all of us, not only in the process of having feedback on our own work, but also the opportunity to read things that we wouldn't normally read that other people were writing, and develop new perspectives and new insights, and hear about readings that we wouldn't have come across that were also relevant to our work individually. And one thing to kind of highlight, of course, is why did this group need to be focused on qualitative research? One thing that the qualitative research focus brought about that I don't think would have happened otherwise was this focus, this kind of crossover between humanities and social science, because a lot of the members of the group are in disciplines where they wouldn't be using quantitative approaches anyway, so they wouldn't have joined a mixed methods group, I don't think. It was almost an assumption for them that this would be qualitative work. And for me, coming from a discipline that is quite quantitative heavy, it was a great opportunity to actually be able to engage in a methodological community as well that shared my approaches. So that was one of the benefits of having it focused on qualitative research. Another was just the opportunity for critical methodological feedback as well, going in depth on how we carried out the research. All of us were at the writing stage in our projects, and it was an opportunity to kind of think through how we wrote about those methodologies, as well as how we kind of developed the argument. And finally, we were all working on book projects. Not everything that we discussed was part of our book project, but all of us were working on book projects, and that also provided this opportunity for exchange on the process and of getting a book contract and so on, which is valuable in itself. I should also say that it was great to have a regular group that we got to know each other so well that we had this real trust and also sense of accountability to each other as well in meeting, and having to have a draft of something ready to share with the others by a certain date, and that was really motivating as well, and also feeling confident being able to share within the group because we knew each other was great as well. Another thing that we did towards the end of the year, we introduced a kind of element of doing joint readings and discussing them. And again, these were readings that were very tied into the work that we were doing, or projects that we were involved in. So these are the readings that we did, and the grant enabled us to buy our individual copies of the books for ourselves as well. So the two books in the middle, Non-Sovereign Futures and World Making After Empire, those two authors actually came and presented on a panel together, and Ernesto Bassi, who's one of the working group members, was the chair on that panel, and others of us attended as well. So it was great that we were able to kind of really look in depth at these books, and it then tied into a wider conversation that we were able to join from our different disciplinary and regional angles, which was fantastic. We also revisited an old nationalism text, Walker Connor's article from 1978, which was just a great opportunity to look at an older piece of nationalism theory in the current context and kind of take it apart from our different perspectives on the current state of nationalism in the world. That was a great thing that we were able to do as well, that kind of stimulated our thinking more broadly about nationalism theory. And finally, National Affects. This was a book that tied into our work for two of us. One for Irina, because she was working on emotions and nationalism, and she'd seen a talk by Harold Closs-Stevens that tied into this. And for me, this also tied in because of my kind of connection to the UK nationalism research networks, and I wrote a book review on this book. So again, it was different texts that we looked at were particularly interesting for different members, but we all were able to benefit from that, those joint readings and discussions. And finally, we held one event as part of funded by the QuIRI grant, which was our first event as a group, and it was we invited Natalie Coe from Syracuse University, who's a geographer, who spoke on how to green a petrostate. Very interesting, again, different angle from what any of us were working on, but really linking into themes of climate change and nationalism, and bringing in another region of the world as well. And we were able to open this up to the wider Cornell community, which was great. And the second event is going to be the one that we're holding in a couple of weeks, which I'll tell you about at the end. How am I doing for time? Have I still got some time?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit then. I'll just briefly stop sharing my slides, just to talk a little bit about why research exchange across disciplines and across regional backgrounds is so important in nationalism studies today. And we all know that nationalism has kind of had a return to the headlines in recent years, and in terms of domestic news in the US, with the rise of white Christian nationalism associated with Trump's election and the January 6th attack on the state capitol, and then the ongoing possibility of Trump's return to the White House is keeping this theme in the headlines in terms of domestic news. And this has been linked to the rise of populist nationalism, different movements globally, different leaders like Modi, Erdogan, Bolsonaro, and a recognition of the huge political and economic shifts that can be brought about by these movements. If you look at cases like Brexit in the UK, and of course the foreign news story that has dominated the headlines for the past year and is particularly relevant for my research, which is Russia's war in Ukraine. So nationalism is this global phenomenon. It's a transnational force as well, and it has these shifting manifestations. And as a result, it's so important for the study of nationalism to have this interdisciplinary thinking and cross-regional comparative perspectives in order to really keep developing rigorous theory that has explanatory force in contemporary contexts. And despite the fact that there are several dedicated conferences on nationalism that are, nominally interdisciplinary and so on, we often find that panels in these conferences tend to cluster around particular disciplines or particular regions, so there isn't as much exchange as there really should be. And as we therefore run the risk of going down the route of methodological nationalism, which is the uncritical use of nationalist categories and ideological assumptions that can occur even in the study of nationalism itself, where we become so steeped in the national context that we're studying that our thinking is coloured by those geographically specific political dynamics or culture, and we ignore those assumptions that we're absorbing from the context themselves. And Russian studies today is a great example of this. So it's the field that I work in, and it's really undergone this huge identity crisis since the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. And it's, this is the topic of all the Russian and East European conferences, is why didn't we see this why didn't we see this coming? We've been studying Russia for years. We knew about its attitude to its former USSR neighbors. We knew about the shifts that were going on in Putin's rhetoric and in terms of domestic policies that were becoming more authoritarian, and we knew how nationalism was being used in the political arena there, and yet we didn't, and we obviously knew that nationalist logic had been used to as a justification for annexing Crimea. We didn't see this coming, and there's this shift going on in Russian studies as a result, where scholars are turning to post-colonial and feminist theory to try and understand Russia in new ways, and turning towards ideas of decolonizing epistemology, and that have really long been a foundation of nationalism studies in many other regions. So this is just an example of how that kind of narrow-mindedness or just too much of a focus on a particular region can lead to siloed thinking that is problematic. And not to dwell too much on this because I want to take up too much time, but I also want to say that there's a risk of this happening again. It's so easy to acknowledge the biases that we missed having in the past, and not recognize our present biases, and what the focus of our attention now might kind of eclipse or obscure. And this is where comparative research and exchange with people coming from very different angles on the same topic can be so useful. So for me, being part of this group and having exposure to both nationalism in other great power states like China, but also in former colonies like Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, that all that research within the group has been so enlightening to me in terms of other ways of looking at Russia as well, and nationalism in the post-Soviet context that I wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. But yeah, we have to keep reminding ourselves that any nationalism, no matter how benign or commendable in the moment, has that potential to turn sour, because of the fact that nationalist principles are inherently exclusionary. And so now, if you look at them in the media, at headlines about Ukrainian nationalism, it's all very positive. It's talked about as this ideal civic nationalism that perhaps in the US we should be aspiring to as an alternative model to Trumpism, that could try and hook people and take them away from that more negative exclusionary nationalism. But the reality is we don't know where that apparently civic nationalism is going to lead, and already there is research coming out saying that there are exclusionary sides to that developing Ukrainian nationalism that we don't hear about so much. So all of these kind of nuances and these other perspectives are just really important in keeping us in check when we're researching something as political as nationalism, whether it's from a sociological angle, a political angle, or from different disciplines. another way in which this has, of course, helped me is in my teaching, because I'm teaching a course on nationalism and identity as well. So it's been great to be able to share some of this comparative work with my students. And in the group, we've also talked about the possibility, we haven't developed it yet, but of doing guest lectures amongst ourselves, so that we can bring a bit more of the detail from different cases into our teaching as well. And to finish, I'm going to just share my screen again to show you. Let me see. There we go. So, yeah, so this is the event that we have coming up in a couple of weeks, Friday, April 28th. And this really is the culmination of the group work that was started with our QuIRI grant. We subsequently got another grant from the Society for the Humanities, which allowed us to continue our work and continue that momentum that we developed. And this is a joint panel event that 4 out of the 5 of us are doing to showcase some of the work that each of us is doing, and how to bring out some of those joint ties, how those comparative that comparative element can produce shared thinking as well. So the theme is nationalism unsettled, and we're going to be talking about alternative narratives of the nation, the sort of the nationalisms that you don't hear so much about, that kind of rub up against nation state nationalisms. So that's a sneak preview, and yeah, you're all welcome to join us. And all I have left to say is thank you to QuIRI for starting us on this process, and it's been fantastic for me, and I think for all of us who've taken part so far.
Thank you, Leila. That was fantastic. I really appreciate your both intellectual work that you did, as well as the reflection that you did about how to set up a good working group. And I think, one of the things that we really try to encourage is that interdisciplinarity. And so that was really lovely to hear. And yes, it is really interesting when you start hanging out with people who are in disciplines where it's like, of course you're going to do qualitative work, as opposed to having to justify your methods all the time. So that's really great that you were able to do that. Excellent. Thank you. Next up, Gili Vidan from Information Science will talk to us about her working group.
Hi, thanks, Lee. You can hear us okay, right? So I'll just clarify, since we have so many multiple angles working, is that today and this time is our usual group's meeting time. So we're using it to attend the QuIRI seminar, which is a great coincidence. So we have our group members sort of sitting around the table, but we individually opened our Zooms, as well as Jason, who's joining us remotely as well. I'll point to them. So I'll go ahead and share a screen as well briefly, or try to be brief. My group members know that's generally a challenge. And what I hope is then to pass on the mic to each of them to introduce themselves briefly, and maybe say a few words about what they've been working on and how they've used this space of our working group and lab meetings. Okay, and there we go. So the title for this slide deck is looking at the particular theme that I think in this group we have talked about the most, which is looking at the specter of the fake in digital technology and how it has emerged in public discourse as a concern, as a source or target for regulation, and also as potentially a productive tool to create new technologies with that try to create fake things. And that's been kind of a running theme through my recent work that together in conversations with Malte Zewitz, we've been able to sort of form this working group and other ideas around. So we actually applied for the QuIRI faculty reading working group for spring 2022, where we had a slightly different cohort than of graduate fellows than the ones that are able to join us today. So this was the founding cohort that ran through regular weekly meetings in the spring. So we had 3 graduate students, 1 from CS, 2 from information science, as well as Malte and myself. Malte is from SDS. And the sort of overarching title for the working group was Critical Qualitative Methods to Study Computational Information Systems, which sitting in Gates Hall where we are right now is kind of an obvious focus point, I would say. And in fact, information science prides itself on being a department where we have interdisciplinarity and a lot of different approaches to study topically similar things. So we're all interested in technologies here, but even in this space, it does feel that the critical, interpretive, and qualitative methods are still somewhat the minority. So it's not a given, much like I guess it is in sociology, that is the approach. And even when that is the approach, it's often not the thing we reflect on, that why we chose to use these methods and what has this added to the conversation. So we really wanted to center this methodological conversation. And that's what brought this initial group of people together. And we did that through alternating between sort of a reading session and I'm going to use Leila's term, manuscript exchange session. So we had a lot less uniformity about what that meant because we had graduate students and faculty in different stages of what they were working on, sharing various different things, right? So like here, conference proceeding paper manuscript versus a grant proposal versus sort of this is a practice talk for a conference. So we had those kind of sessions and we alternated them with reading some work in the field. And then last spring, we're also lucky enough to have 2 guest speakers come and present. We read their work and then we had a conversation with them. So Eli Nelson, who is a professor of Native American Studies at Williams College, shared with us a piece he wrote on AI and indigenous sci-fi. So we read some sci-fi stories and then talked about that. And we read a newish book from Dylan Mulvin called Proxies. Sorry, these are super blurry images from the slide, but the cultural work of standing in. So we thought about sort of what makes a book also, and we're able to talk with him about, when you embark on a project that has this kind of theoretical focus point, how do you choose different case studies and how do you justify those choices? So it allows us to have a lot of conversation just on how do you start and embark on a new research project from this qualitative perspective. And one more thing I want to say about what I think was really great about this working group is, for me, I was new to Cornell that year, and unlike this year where I have this wonderful graduate students that I work with from the get-go, didn't have graduate students that I was working with, and I wasn't teaching graduate students as a way to tap onto that great community. So the working group was really a great space for me to meet graduate students who shared these interests and, were maybe past their coursework time, so we wouldn't have crossed paths otherwise, and develop that community. But also to be able to compensate for their time, to sort of give them this stipend of a research budget in a way. That the membership in this group allows you to buy books, that we're going to read, which I don't think graduate students often just get to have. So the QuIRI support was really a great way to sort of both give them a title as members of the group, as well as some compensation. And I think that when we're thinking about what makes good communities and working groups is having these kind of ability to reward people who show up for the work that you want them to do. So I think this was a really, really great project, and it's kind of set up a precedent for me to thinking about what would I want to do in the following year. And we were able to tap into some additional funding elsewhere at Cornell to continue the working group with a new cohort into this is out of order, into this year, where we've been meeting less frequently, but the entire year. So every 2 weeks or so as a group, and I'll talk about a group this year in a moment. And while the sort of topic of computational information systems is super broad and wide-ranging. One of the threads that you might notice just from the three books that I put on the slide that runs through it is this interest in thinking about this concern over the fake, the simulated, the shadowy side of digital systems, and interrogate where those kind of valuations of what is true and authentic and valid come from when we are dealing with digital technologies. And for me, a lot of that comes from, as of the last 5 years or so, I think an increased concern that so much of the internet is fake. And in the last couple of months with large language models, LLMs, all the GPT models, I think that has sprung up front and center even more so. But trying to look at what happens culturally when we accept as a fact that this is now a way that reality is being mediated, that the fakeness is all around us. And in a way, try to flip that concern around and say, well, actually, what does the assertion of fakeness does? And what are potentially the productive uses of such fakeness? So this year, in some of our reading selections, I think we really try to take that provocation a bit more directly. And we have reformed their group as the Fake Lab, which is a completely accidental acronym for Fidelity, Authenticity, and Knowability in Electronic Media. And one day Jose brought us an Oculus Rift, an Oculus set. So we were able to look like we were working on virtual reality in a very serious lab kind of way. So I used these images that I don't know if you guys gave me the consent for release form to use in the presentation, sorry. To play around with some of these new virtual environments, but mostly what we do when we get together, and perhaps a more accurate description of our time together, looks a lot more like this, which is where we have joint readings. So our academic year, current academic year members are 4 graduate students from SDS and Information Science, as well as Malte and myself. And we started our year by reading several articles from a recent special issue in New Media and Society on scam culture and digital media. So that was kind of our initial starting point. And then we also read new work in history of science and STS that try to conceptualize some historical case studies about how people derived rules and violated them with our sense of the algorithmic control that many of us are experiencing today by historian of science Lorraine Daston. And then in 2 weeks from now, we're reading this semester's book, which is Dan Bouck's Democracies Data, which is a book on the 1940 census and the controversies that surrounded that data collection process. So we've been able to really use this space to read new works and discuss them in new light. So these are all kind of recent books that I think are not even yet at the Cornell Library. So it's been great to be able to tap into those in the group. I think at this point, just for the sake of time, I'll pass things on to other members, but I'll just say one other element that I think is really great about the manuscript exchange or the workshopping aspect, when we're not just doing joint readings, is that we really do have graduate students in different stages who are themselves working on different things and are trying to formulate their projects, as well as for me, I know that it's been a space where I could workshop my ideas and my book proposal that I've shared recently with the group. But we really get to have this sort of cross cohorts exchange of ideas as well as kind of know-how. So if a more advanced person, student is able to share, you know, a grant proposal, then somebody who's just starting to think about a project can see what that is supposed to look like. So I think groups that allow for that kind of exchange are really, really important. And this has been a great space in this way. So that'll pass things on. Jordan.
Hi, I'm Jordan. I'm a first year PhD information science. Gili is one of the co-chairs on my committee. And I've also taken a course with Malta in SDS. And yeah, so what's been really great for me working with the FIG Lab has been having a group of people that I wasn't necessarily sure I was going to have coming into the program. I knew that there was a lot of interdisciplinary work going on, but I had originally come from geography, where I did have that opportunity moving around in different spaces, but I wasn't so sure. But joining the FIG Lab really gave me the opportunity to kind of reach across the aisle and talk to people who have been doing like vastly different things than I have. And I guess more concretely, I recently have been working on a paper with Gili on Axie Infinity, a crypto game that pays players just for playing. And we workshopped an early version of that paper, and we brought it to a conference at the Information Society Project at Yale about 2 weeks ago, and presented. But before doing that, I had the opportunity to present for the FIG Lab, and everybody who had really great feedback really guided me towards what kinds of things I should be emphasizing when I went to the presentation, so that I could solicit the feedback that we really needed, beyond just simply, oh, what is the project? But getting more detailed feedback ahead of time helped me anticipate questions, and guide the questioners to where they would be most useful for us. So yeah, that's been my takeaways so far this year.
I'm Jose. I'm a first year IS student also. I work with qualitative, but I'm also here. And I work mainly on things related to technology policy and participation, still trying to figure out how everything fits together. But many of the things I've been working this last year, it's related to AI and AI policy. And not to repeat things that Jordan already said, I just want to add one thing that for me it's been pretty amazing to be here from the start. Is like, even though we must sometimes work on different technologies and from very different approaches, like being able to think like together in how to build like narratives on the things that we're doing, and also like learning a lot of very practical things on how, I don't know, build a grant proposal or a book, or how the book worlds work for someone that writes papers. It's been like really amazing. And even though like in theory it's like this interdisciplinary space in all the departments, I think like here it's kind of like, as Gili said, it's not for granted, like the critical approach and the qualitative approach. So like being able to share that here is also like really good. More specifically, like in the fall, I was able to share like an very early draft of a case study that I'm working on the Chilean AI policy that I presented at the graduate SDS conference last semester, and it was like really helpful to be able first to send the very early draft and then to present it and to discuss from what was the narrative that I was going to give, how I was framing the paper first, and also like to tailor it to the specific community I was discussing in that specific conference. And also one of the objectives I had was actually to see which was the right community for that work. So it was like really useful for that also. And this semester I was able to share an essay I sent for a competition on the 100 report that is like critiquing an AI report, or talking about it. And it was also like really useful to be able to see different visions on how I was approaching the report, and test like from the metaphor that I wanted to use to the narrative itself and how it should flow to be an essay. I'm not used to write essays, so it was also like very useful to learn how to write like short pieces instead of very long papers. So it was like amazing to have the feedback to be able to then rework the essay and send it. So it's my take.
I'm Katie. I'm a first year PhD student in IS. I don't really know what to say. It's not just repeating what everybody else has brought up already. But yeah, this lab has been really great in terms of interacting with people with similar interests, but also coming from different perspectives. So I come from sociology, digital humanities, which is different from like policy and law. So it's kind of fun talking about all these topics that we all have a shared interest in, but like from all these different perspectives. I think the only thing original I have to add is just the papers and the books that we've been reading in here have been really nice to encounter, because I probably wouldn't have picked those up on my own. But they've been very relevant, and they've been really kind of getting my brain going for areas of research that I would like to pursue. And yeah, I guess just, again, everyone presenting and like learning from each other and kind of contributing to shared ideas. It's been great.
Okay, Jason, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'll be quick. So I'm a graduate student in STS, and it was really great for me to take part in this because I got to learn more about IS as a discipline, including like different kind of publishing and conference procedures. And then I also really benefited from workshopping my dissertation proposal / grant proposal to the group. And I got really great feedback from everyone, a lot of which I incorporated into those proposals. And I passed my dissertation proposal defense and received the grant. So I think that's a testament to the strengths of the feedback that I received. But yeah, overall, it's been really wonderful. Engaging with a lot of different work that I wouldn't normally have engaged with. And it's really helped me flesh out a lot of my own work and elaborate on concepts and other things that I'm interested in.
And I'll just add on Leila's point about potentially guest lecturing in each other's classes, that Jason recently visited my current undergraduate lecture to present on his work, which I first learned about when he circulated some of his work here. So he did an amazing job with the undergrad class as well, and I was able to bank on that expertise for my own class.
And then finally, just briefly, I hope this doesn't come across as a hostage situation where we say, this was a great working group, wasn't it, Jordan? This thing, but I've been very fortunate to be part of this group, thanks to Gili and to everyone else over the 2 years. This is the kind of working group that reminds me why I signed up to work at a university in the first place. Many faculty members might know the phenomenon that in your everyday life, you don't have these spaces necessarily where you can discuss things for 2 hours in one block every other week. And so that's been a great privilege. The two things I want to highlight is one, something that both Leila, Gili, and Lee said, namely that it's really fascinating how interpretive research is a sensibility that runs through a lot of approaches in very different areas. Jason's doing history, Jordan is doing critical research, Gili's doing history too, Jose's doing policy research and so on. So we have a whole range of things, but there's a shared sensibility, and that's beautiful to see around this idea of interpretive methods. And that's also, I guess, why QuIRI exists in the first place. And then the second reason I think why I've enjoyed our group so much is really to work with graduate students. I mean, no offense to any faculty member, but this tends to be the area in which a lot of the most innovative and interesting work is going on, as opposed to the rest of us who tend to then at some point repeat things with so many other things to do. And that's been a great privilege. So thank you very much to everyone.
People went for everyone, so thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to hear from all of you at your various different stages. I really appreciated hearing from the graduate students, and as well as Malta's final remarks regarding just the importance of different kinds of collaboration. And I think in qualitative work, sometimes we don't always, think about it on maybe particular projects, or we think about it, with our students, but not necessarily in different ways. And so for me, it was, QuIRI is its own space to collaborate in, not necessarily on projects, but if we think about collaboration as a kind of thinking with others, I think QuIRI can serve a really important purpose, as well as helping to create working groups. And so it's so lovely and wonderful to hear all that you have accomplished with really very little money. So I want to applaud that and to thank you, for taking the leads and for really, as Gili said, showing up and putting in the work. And I think it really helps to create really special intellectual places that are really unique to universities, and I'll just say to Cornell have the resources to be able to fund things like this, even if it's not that much. It's still it's important and it's meaningful. And I know there are many people on the Zoom today who have applied for funds and gotten them, and it's so lovely to have you part of our larger QuIRI community. And so thank you all for showing up. I do want to ask, are there any questions for Leila or any of the working group members? Yes, Joseph.
First, is there too much background noise, or can you hear me clearly?
You're good.
It's okay. Okay, so I'm glad I just got back from some field work, so I'm actually able to attend a QuIRI event for the first time in a while. And so I'm glad I came back for this one. Leila, we met, months ago or over a year ago, I guess now. And I'm glad that your research on nationalism has progressed. I have sort of it might sound like a cynical question, but it's really not, because I've benefited from 2 QuIRI groups and really appreciate the interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary aspect of the working groups. But you're at the stage of research that I hope to be at in a couple of years, right? Publishing a book, you have a book contract, you're a postdoc, you're ready, you're doing the things. Do the publishers care? How do you pitch interdisciplinary research in sociology, for example? You're a sociologist, right? Do the publishers care? So this is more so a sort of professionalization question as I deal with the fears of the job market in a couple of years. So however you want to take that, I'd like to know.
Thanks for the question. I'm afraid I can't help you very much because I'm not quite at the stage that you maybe thought I was, so I don't actually have a book contract. And I'm also on the job market. So I'm hoping that publishers and employers are going to be sympathetic to or interested in my interdisciplinary angle and interests and the interdisciplinary nature of my work. But yeah, it kind of, it depends a lot on the individual publisher, I think. So I said there are certainly examples within our group. Irina Troconis, for example, is very interdisciplinary, and she's got a contract for her book, and everything has gone well for her in that regard, with the press that she wanted. And I think, yeah, it's hard to talk specifics since I don't have, I haven't had the experience myself yet. But yeah, I'm not sure. In terms of publishing articles, it's certainly not a problem at all, because there are journals for everything, and including, high-ranking journals that at least in my field, that are very much encouraging of interdisciplinary work. Yeah, but I think also for the book market, there are. If you have an interdisciplinary angle, it means that you can speak to different audiences, and if you pitch that right, that's going to be to your benefit.
Yeah, it's always hard for me to, well, thank you. And it's always hard for me to kind of discern, right? Because in political science, we tend to be siloed, but give sort of, reference interdisciplinary work as beneficial, but whether it comes to publications or not is a different question. So thank you, I appreciate that.
Excellent. Any other questions? Okay, so the one thing I'll just say is to make a pitch for 2 other seminars. One was the one on writing, and it reminded me that Jose talked about storytelling and how it is that we write and do the work of telling the stories of our research. So that is one of the seminars that we did on storytelling. And the other one related to Joseph's question was on collaboration and how to think about different kinds of collaboration in qualitative work. That's also on our YouTube channel from last year. So it might prove helpful as we think about these challenges. But we all know that, again, that we are stronger together, and it makes all of our research better in all that we do. So thank you all. There will be one more QuIRI seminar in May on political phenomenology that I will be sending out. And I want to thank Leila and Gili and Jose and Jordan and Katie and who else, and Malta and Jason for sharing with us today. It was really fantastic. I hope you all get out and enjoy this beautiful weather while we have it. And until next time, thank you all. And welcome back.